The Michigan Terminal System is one of the first time-sharing computer operating systems, developed in 1967 at the University of Michigan for use on IBM S360-67, S370 and compatible mainframe computers. It was developed and used by a consortium of 8 universities in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom over a period of 33 years. Overview. The software developed by the staff of the University of Michigan's Academic Computing Center for the operation of the IBM S360-67, S370, and compatible computers can be described as a multi-programming, multiprocessing, virtual memory, time-sharing supervisor that handles a number of resident, reentrant programs. Among them is a large subsystem, called MTS, for command interpretation, execution control, file management, and accounting. End users interact with the computer's resources through MTS using terminal, batch, and server-oriented facilities. The name MTS refers to MTS, the UMMPS job program with which most end users interact. MTS, the software system, including UMMPS, the MTS and other job programs, command language subsystems, public files, and documentation, and MTS, the time-sharing service offered at a particular site, including the MTS software system, the hardware used to run MTS, the staff that supported MTS and assisted end users, and the associated administrative policies and procedures. MTS was used on a production basis at 12 or 13 sites in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Brazil, and possibly Yugoslavia, and at several more sites on a trial or benchmarking basis. MTS was developed and maintained by a core group of 8 universities that comprised the Mts Consortium. The University of Michigan announced in 1988 that reliable MTS service will be provided as long as there are users requiring it. MTS may be phased out after alternatives are able to meet users' computing requirements. It ceased operating MTS for end users on June 30, 1996. By that time, most services had moved to client, server-based computing systems, typically Unix for servers and various Mac, PC, and Unix flavors for clients. The University of Michigan shut down its MTS system for the last time on May 30, 1997. Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute is believed to be the last site to use MTS in a production environment. RPI retired MTS in June 1999. Today MTS still runs using IBM S370 emulators such as Hercules, SIM390, and FlexS. Origins. In the mid-1960s, the University of Michigan was providing batch processing services on IBM 7090 hardware under the control of the University of Michigan Executive System, but was interested in offering interactive services using time-sharing. At that time, the work that computers could perform was limited by their lack of real memory storage capacity. When IBM introduced its System 360 family of computers in the mid-1960s, it did not provide a solution for this limitation, and within IBM there were conflicting views about the importance of and need to support time-sharing. A paper titled Program and Addressing Structure in a Time-Sharing Environment by Bruce Arden, Bernard Galler, Frank Westerveld, and Tom O'Brien, building upon some basic ideas developed at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was published in January 1966. The paper outlined a virtual memory architecture using dynamic address translation that could be used to implement time sharing. After a year of negotiations and design studies, IBM agreed to make a one-of-a-kind version of its S360-65 mainframe computer with dynamic address translation features that would support virtual memory and accommodate UM's desire to support time sharing. The computer was dubbed the Model S 360-65M. The M stood for Michigan, but IBM initially decided not to supply a time-sharing operating system for the machine. Meanwhile, a number of other institutions heard about the project, including General Motors, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Lincoln Laboratory, Princeton University, and Carnegie Institute of Technology. They were all intrigued by the time-sharing idea and expressed interest in ordering the modified IBM S360 series machines. With this demonstrated interest, IBM changed the computer's model number to S360-67 and made it a supported product. With requests for over 100 new Model S 360-67s, IBM realized there was a market for time-sharing, and agreed to develop a new time-sharing operating system called TSS 360 for delivery at roughly the same time as the first Model S 360-67. While waiting for the Model 65M to arrive, computing center personnel were able to perform early time-sharing experiments using an IBM System 360 Model 50 that was funded by the ARPA CONCOMP project. The time-sharing experiment began as a half-page of code written out on a kitchen table, combined with a small multi-programming system, LLMPS from Mts Lincoln Laboratory, which was modified and became the multi-programming supervisor, which in turn ran the MTS job program. This earliest incarnation of MTS was intended as a throwaway system used to gain experience with the new IBM S360 hardware, and which would be discarded when IBM's TSS 360 operating system became available. Development of TSS took longer than anticipated, its delivery date was delayed, and it was not yet available when the S360-67 arrived at the computing center in January 1967. At this time had to decide whether to return the Model 67 and select another mainframe, or to develop MTS as an interim system for use until TSS was ready. The decision was to continue development of MTS, and the staff moved their initial development work from the Model 50 to the Model 67. TSS development was eventually cancelled by IBM, then reinstated, and then cancelled again. But by this time, unlike the system they had developed, it was no longer considered interim, and MTS would be used at and other sites for 33 years. Mts Consortium. MTS was developed, maintained, and used by a consortium of 8 universities in the US, Canada, and the United Kingdom. University of Michigan, 1967 to 1997, US. University of British Columbia, 1968 to 1998, Canada. NUMAC, 1969 to 1992, United Kingdom. University of Alberta, 1971 to 1994, Canada. Wayne State University, 1971 to 1998, US. Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, 1976 to 1999, US. Simon Fraser University, 1977 to 1992, Canada. University of Durham, 1982 to 1992, United Kingdom. Several sites ran more than one MTS system. NUMAC ran 2, Michigan ran 3 in the mid-1980s, UBC ran 3 or 4 at different times. Each of the MTS sites made contributions to the development of MTS, sometimes by taking the lead in the design and implementation of a new feature, and at other times by refining, enhancing, and critiquing work done elsewhere. Many MTS components are the work of multiple people at multiple sites. In the early days, collaboration between the MTS sites was accomplished through a combination of face-to-face site visits, phone calls, the exchange of documents and magnetic tapes by snail mail, and informal get-togethers at share or other meetings. Later, email, computer conferencing using Confer and * forum, network file transfer, and email attachments supplemented and eventually largely replaced the earlier methods. The members of the Mts Consortium produced a series of 82 Mts newsletters between 1971 and 1982 to help coordinate Mts development. Starting at UBC in 1974, the Mts Consortium held annual Mts workshops at one of the member sites. The workshops were informal, but included papers submitted in advance and proceedings published after the fact that included session summaries. In the mid-1980s, several Western workshops were held with participation by a subset of the Mts Sites. The annual workshops continued even after Mts development work began to taper off. Called simply the Community Workshop, they continued until the mid-1990s to share expertise and common experiences in providing computing services. Even though Mts was no longer the primary source for computing on their campuses and some had stopped running Mts entirely, Mts Sites, in addition to the 8 Mts Consortium sites that were involved in its development, Mts was run at a number of other sites, including Centro Brasileiro de Pesquisas Físicas within the Conselho Nacional de Desenvolvimento Científico e Tecnológico, Brazil, Empresa Brasileira de Pesquisa Agropecuária, Brazil, Hewlett-Packard, U.S., Michigan State University, U.S., Goddard Space Flight Center, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, U.S. A copy of Mts was also sent to the University of Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, though whether or not it was ever installed is not known. INRIA, the French National Institute for Research in Computer Science and Control in Grenoble, France, ran Mts on a trial basis, as did the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada, Southern Illinois University, the Naval Postgraduate School, Amdahl Corporation, Saint Systems for McGill University Hospitals, Stanford University, and University of Illinois in the United States, and a few other sites. Hardware used. In theory, Mts will run on the IBM S360-67, any of the IBM S370 series, and its successors. Mts has been run on the following computers in production, benchmarking, or trial configurations: IBM S360-67, S370-148, S370-168, 3033U, 4341, 4361, 4381, 3081D, 3081GX, 3083B, 3090, 200, 3090, 400, 3090, 600, and S9000, 720. Amdahl. 470V, 6, 470V, 7, 470V, 8, 5860, 5870, 5990. Hitachi. NAS 9060. Various S370 emulators. The University of Michigan installed and ran Mts on the first IBM S360-67 outside of IBM in 1967, the second Amdahl 470V, 6 in 1975, the first Amdahl 5860 in 1982, and the first factory-shipped IBM 3090-400 in 1986. NUMAC ran Mts on the first S360-67 in the UK and very likely the first in Europe. The University of British Columbia took the lead in converting Mts to run on the IBM S370 series in 1974. The University of Alberta installed the first Amdahl 470V, 6 in Canada in 1975. By 1978, NUMAC had moved main MTS activity onto its IBM S370 series. MTS was designed to support up to 4 processors on the IBM S360-67, although IBM only produced 1 and 2 processor configurations of the Model 67. In 1984, RPI updated MTS to support up to 32 processors in the IBM S370XA hardware series. Although 6 processors is likely the largest configuration actually used, MTS supports the IBM Vector Facility, available as an option on the IBM 3090 and S9000 systems. In early 1967, running on the single-processor IBM S360-67 Atom without virtual memory support, MTS was typically supporting 5 simultaneous terminal sessions and 1 batch job. In November 1967, after virtual memory support was added, MTS running on the same IBM S360-67 was simultaneously supporting 50 terminal sessions and up to 5 batch jobs. In August 1968, a dual-processor IBM S360-67 replaced the single-processor system, supporting roughly 70 terminal and up to 8 batch jobs. By late 1991, MTS Atom was running on an IBM S9000-720, supporting over 600 simultaneous terminal sessions and from 3 to 8 batch jobs. MTS can be IPL'd under VM370, and some MTS sites did so, but most ran MTS on native hardware without using a virtual machine. Features. Some of the notable features of MTS include programs developed for eMTS. The following are some of the notable programs developed for MTS. Programs that run under MTS. The following are some of the notable programs ported to MTS from other systems. Programming languages available under MTS. MTS supports a rich set of programming languages, some developed for MTS and others ported from other systems. System architecture. UMMPS, the supervisor, has complete control of the hardware and manages a collection of job programs. One of the job programs is MTS, the job program with which most users interact. MTS operates as a collection of command language subsystems. One of the CLSs allows for the execution of user programs. MTS provides a collection of system subroutines that are available to CLS's user programs, and MTS itself. Among other things, these system subroutines provide standard access to device support routines, the components that perform device-dependent input-output, manuals and documentation. The list that follow are quite University of Michigan-centric. Most other MTS sites use some of this material, but they also produce their own manuals, memos, reports, and newsletters tailored to the needs of their site. End-user documentation. The manual series MTS, the Michigan Terminal System, was published from 1967 through 1991, in volumes 1 through 23, which were updated and reissued irregularly. Initial releases of the volumes did not always occur in numeric order, and volumes occasionally changed names when they were updated or republished. In general, the higher the number, the more specialized the volume. The earliest versions of MTS Volume 1 and 2 had a different organization and content from the MTS volumes that followed and included some internal, as well as end-user documentation. The second edition from December 1967 covered MTS Volume 1. Introduction, concepts and facilities, calling conventions, batch, terminal, tape, and data concentrator users guides, description of UMMPS and MTS, files and devices, command language, user programs, subroutine and macro library, descriptions, public or library file descriptions, and internal specifications. Dynamic loader, file and device management, device support routines, and file routines. MTS Volume 2. Language Processor Descriptions. F-Level Assembler, Fortran G, IOH, 360, PIL, SNOBOL4, UMAS, WATFOR, and 8ASS. The following MTS volumes were published by the University of Michigan Computing Center and are available as PDFs. MTS Reference Summary, a 60-page, 3 by 7.5 pocket guide to MTS, Computing Center, University of Michigan. The Taxia Primer, MTS version, Brill, Robert C., Computing Center, University of Michigan. Fundamental Use of the Michigan Terminal System, Thomas J. Schreiber, 5th edition, Ulrichs Books, Inc., Ann Arbor, Michigan, 1983, 376 pp. Digital Computing, Fortran IV, WATF IV, and MTS, Bryce Carnahan and James O. Wilkes, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, 1968 to 1979, 1976, 538 p. Documentation for MIDAS, Michigan Interactive Data Analysis System, Statistical Research Laboratory, University of Michigan. Osiris 3 MTS Supplement, Center for Political Studies, University of Michigan. Various aspects of MTS at the University of Michigan were documented in a series of Computing Center memos which were published irregularly from 1967 through 1987. Numbered 2 through 924, though not necessarily in chronological order. Numbers Chapter 2 through 599 are general memos about various software and hardware. The 600 series are the Consultant's Note series, short memos for beginning to intermediate users. The 800 series covers issues relating to the Xerox 9700 printer, text processing, and typesetting, and the 900 series covers microcomputers. There was number 700 series. In 1989, this series continued as reference memos with less of a focus on MTS. A long run of newsletters targeted to end users at the University of Michigan with the titles Computing Center News, Computing Center Newsletter, Computing News, and the Information Technology Digest were published starting in 1971. There was also introductory material presented in the User Guide, MTS User Guide, and tutorial series, including Getting Connected, Introduction to Terminals and Microcomputers, Introduction to the Computing Center, Introduction to Computing Center Services, Introduction to Database Management Systems on MTS, Introduction to Format, Introduction to Magnetic Tapes, Introduction to MTS, Introduction to the MTS File Editor, Introduction to Programming and Debugging in MTS, Introduction to Terminals, Introduction to Terminals and Microcomputers, Internals documentation. The following materials were not widely distributed, but were included in MTS distributions. MTS Operators Manual, MTS Message Manual, MTS Volume N, Systems Edition, MTS Volume 99, Internals Documentation, Supervisor Call Descriptions, Disk Disaster Recovery Procedures, a series of lectures describing the architecture and internal organization of the Michigan Terminal System given by Mike Alexander, Don Boetner, Jim Hamilton, and Doug Smith.